Okay, so let's get started. Welcome to module 1. So in the first module, we're going to be looking at the following. We're going to create a new Flutterflow project. We're going to add some pages. We're going to add our register page, our login page, a settings page, and our main app home page. We're going to be basing this whole tutorial on a AI app kind of scenario that we're going to be using. We're going to create a new Supabase project and we're going to connect that to Flutterflow. We're going to complete the basic email authentication setup so our users can log in and log out, etc. using their email address. And we're going to check the functionality of what we do in test mode. So with that being said, let's move on to the first part of the lesson and create our new Flutterflow project. So if we start at the Flutterflow homepage and we sign in, is probably what your Flutterflow dashboard looks like. It should, if you haven't done any projects or done any building with Flutterflow before, this is what you'll see: a completely blank workspace. This is the free version of Flutterflow that I'm using here, rather than one of the paid versions which I'd use normally. So everything that, if you've got the free version, which is what I sort of said in the intro, this is everything that you will have access to, I've got access to, so I won't be using anything that you don't have. So first thing we need to do is create a new project. So click on create new, and we're going to create a blank project. Now there's lots of templates within Flutterflow that you can use, and you're more than welcome obviously to kind of play with those at any time you want, but we're going to create a blank project, so it will have basically nothing in it at all, and you need to give our project a name, so we'll call it image generator app, because that's what we're going to build. And then we'll go create blank. So I'm going to skip all of the tutorials that Flutterflow is going to offer us at the beginning and a bit of a tour, so we'll go straight to it. So once you've created your app and it loads, this is what you have, and this is the screen, this is the workspace. Now at the top here, this is our mobile setup template, and then there's the page for tablet and page for desktop screens. We're going to be working purely in the mobile page layout for this particular project, and if you right click on that, it gives you a list of different mobile sizes, and we'll stick with the iPhone 14 Pro as the screen size we're going to work to. Now on the app, when it loads on the blank page, you have something called the app bar at the top, and that is basically, if you look at the top of any app where there's the page title, the back button, that kind of scenario, that's the app bar. And then we've got the main space where we're going to put our page elements to build our app for our users to interact with. And on the left hand side, we've got all the elements that we can use within Flutterflow to build our apps. So the main apps we use for layouts are columns and rows. So as you can see, if I click on that, there is already a column in place, and then on this left hand side, this is your different sections within Flutterflow to go and interact with different parts of the service. The top two are the important ones really to start off with, and that's the widget palette, which is the top one, and that gives us all of our different widgets we can use, and I'll explain those as we go. And then you've got the tree view, and that is basically our widgets that we've currently got on our page. So we've got our home page, which has got a column and the app bar and the text which says page title. So that's your blank page and your blank project as it starts. So if we go to column, for instance, and then you'll see the column will have disappeared. We've now just got an app bar and a blank page, because I just clicked on the column and deleted it. So, and the reason I did that, this is how you to place a widget into your page. You select the widget you want, and we'll start off with a column. So if you was to do this, so if you click on the widget tree, find the column in here and delete it, and then go back to the widget palette and then drag and drop. So you click and drag the column into place. So you keep your left mouse button clicked, drag it into place, and you've now got a column back on your page. And then from there we can build. On the right hand side, we've got all the properties of whatever object we have selected. So at the moment we have the column selected, and as you can see, there are a number of different options within here which we'll talk about as we go along, rather than trying to explain them all in one go. We'll talk about these. And then if you have nothing selected, so you've got the page itself selected, which you can do by clicking off. So if you click on the column, then just click anywhere in the blank space, it'll select the page, and that'll have your page properties. So you can change backgrounds, and the safe area is to do with the space on a phone, so to make sure that text isn't hidden behind areas within that are actually taken up by hardware. And you've got the name of the page, and then page parameters will come onto at a later point. So that's where all your properties of your elements are, and these are all your elements basically. So this is the list of the ones you're using, and then the one above is the ones you can use. Really, for now, I think that's probably all we need to know. I think what we want to do is actually go on and do something. So first we need is a register users page. So what we'll do, back on the right hand side on the properties, if we click on the button there highlighted, the home page, so you click on that, and then we can delete that text, and you want to call it register. And then click the tick, and then that page is now called register, and that's where we register our users. Now, because it's our page before we're into the app, we're not going to bother with the app bar. So if you select the app bar and press the delete key, alternatively go to your widget tree. If you right click on the app bar, you can put it in the bin from there. So either or, so you can select it and press the delete key on your keyboard and it will disappear, or right click and then we delete the app bar like that, and then all we've got then is a column and our page. So and this is a good way of demonstrating the safe area. So as I said, so on your phone at the top there's a section that's taken up by hardware depending on your model. So what happens is we've got the safe area disabled now, and if you click on column it takes up the whole of the page. But if I enable the safe area and click the column, it doesn't take up the bit at the top, which is where the little widget is on the new iPhones, or the cutout of the screen on the older versions. So I'll keep it activated, the safe area. So what we need to do now is add some elements on this page for our users to interact with to register a account within our app. So the first element we need is called the form widget, which if you just type in the search bar form, and we want form validation, and that's the widget we want to start off with. So if you click on that, hold the left mouse button and drag it into place, and then we've got a form widget in the column. And if you select the column, and over here on your properties have that, click on the alignment center. So this is the alignment for the widget. Click on alignment center, your column will then be centered within your page, and our form is also then centered. And now our form, we want to change the width. So this is the width in relation to the screen. We want to change it to percent, and let's go to 90%. So our form widget covers most of our page. So we've now got a blank widget covering most of the width of our page, centered. So we've centered the column that the form widget sits within. So if we go to we've got the column, and then we've got the form widget within it, and then we've centered the column and the form widget, we have now made 90% width. So it gives us a little bit of border either side. And then if we select the column again, down here, these are the column properties. Now, if I show you what we do here, so if I click that, our form widget is now in the center. So there's our column. And what this does, this control here, this determines the position of the elements within your column in terms of their alignment. So like there, so that means that your element within your column will be at the top. If we change that to center, that means your element will be in the center of your column vertically, and the form will now be at the bottom. And then if you've got more than one element in a column vertically, that's where these come into play. We'll get to those when I'll explain those when we get to them. But for now, we just want to put that on center. So our form widget is in the center of our page vertically, and we've also got it center horizontally. Again, align left, align right. We will come to those at a later date. And likewise, these are the elements of scrollable, etc. We'll come to it at a later date, but for now we want our form widget to be centrally within our column like this. We now need to add some elements within our form fields to be able to our users to interact. We're going to need some text fields and a button, but first we need to add a column. So as I said at the outset, the column and the row, they're really the main elements that we use when we're creating layouts. Row, column and container are the three main ones in actual fact. But what we need to drag a column into our form element, and this will allow us to stack some different text fields within there. So if we put column in there, and then if we then just go into there, so we've got our form element and then a column is within it. So we've got the main column, which is the one on the page. Then we've got the form element, which is centered as we know. And then now within that, we have now got a column. And then now we can start putting some text fields in. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the widget, the available widgets in the build menu, scroll down to the bottom of the available widgets, and you want to drag the text field across into your column. Now this is where we'll look at padding. So if you keep that selected, that text field, and you see this section here is the padding. So the green lines at the side, it means there's 8 pixels of padding away from the edge of the column for the text field. And because we want our text fields a bit spaced as well, what we want to do, we want to add top and bottom padding. Now this option here means that it's individually selected left, right, top, bottom, or if you select the uniform padding option, you can just type into that box the amount of padding you want in pixels, or you can use the slider. But we'll stick with 10, it's kind of not a decent number. And then so our next text field, we'll just drag across, and you need to drag it into that space, into the green space of padding below the previous one, and then do the same again. Give that 10 pixels of padding, and then finally text field number 3, again it sits in the green padding space, and that way it's sitting within the form element. So there we've got 3 identical text boxes, and if we go here, you've got form, column, 3 text fields. Now we're going to rename these because it's not great practice to keep them all the same name. So at the top, again on the right hand side in your properties at the top, click on the edit text field, and we'll call this one email, and the next one we'll call password, and the final one we'll call confirm password. We'll use that in camel case. And if we go here, you can see on the left hand side our 3 different text objects have all been renamed. Now this is kind of optional, but we're going to look at the styling. So on the properties here we've got all kinds of different things we can do, but what we're going to look at in the first instance is the text size. Now the default font size is 14, which we'll keep for now, and all the font weights again we'll keep normal. So we're keeping the font size 14 and normal, and then we do want to give it a label. So in the label text you want to enter email address, and you can see that's the prompt that the user gets, and that again is size 1400, font weight normal, and the text color. Plenty of options to choose from, or you can go and type in custom colors via RGB or just using the sliders, but we'll just use secondary text, that's fine. And then down to the bottom we can have borders. So as you can see, these just have an underline border. But if we scroll back down to the bottom, let's put an outline border. We'll keep the border color as alternate because it's that sort of just slightly different grey. And then the focus border means when that particular element is in use, the border changes to that color, and if there's an error it will change to that red. The border width is, so you can see the outline there. If we go down to the bottom, change the border width to 4, that will double the thickness of the border, which kind of looks terrible. So we'll leave the border width 2, and then the border radius is simply the radius of the corners, 8, which is the standard. Seems to work pretty well. So we'll do the same with this one. This is create password in your label. And then scroll to the bottom, we want an outline, and we'll leave it as 2. And then the other one is confirm password, so we'll leave everything the same apart from we go to the label and we'll change it to confirm password, and then at the very bottom again just change the border to an outline. So you should now have 3 text boxes for users to create an account on your page. Now the next thing we want is a button underneath, so our users can click submit. Now here we want to put a row, so we've got a column, and within columns then you can have rows to have different elements within rows within the column. You don't need to create a row necessarily for the text objects, they are basically their own row as well, but a button doesn't necessarily do that. So if we go in here, we've dropped a column, so you drag and drop the column into the green space again underneath your confirm password text element, and you'll see we've got a row in our form element below there, and then within the row then I'm going to drag and drop the button. Then if you select the row by clicking it, and if we go down here to the alignment, our horizontal alignment we want to be central, and that will move the button. So what that does is move the elements within the row to their alignment, as I said a while ago, and we can have left, right, central, or these other options which we will get to. It spaces them out basically, but we'll get to those when we need them. And then likewise the vertical alignment for this we don't really need, so we'll stick with central. So we've got a button in the center of our screen within our form element. Now if we then click on the button itself, we then get our properties, and again we'll change the button name to submit, and then the button text there will change to submit. So we've got a submit button. Obviously this doesn't do anything yet, but that's our little setup there. Now our users obviously will get to this page and they will have no clue what our app's called or what it does. So what we want to do, or what you even need to do on this app, so what we need to do next is add a row further up, and as you can see that's our row which is above our form element. So that column is the column within our form element, and that row is above it. So if we go back into here, we've got column, row, form. So the row is outside the form, then you've got the form, the column, and then our elements within it. So in this row we go back to the build, and this text option is, I'm going to drag and drop a text option into our row, and again select the row itself, change the alignment to central over here, and then click back on the text and just change the hello world to register. And that's actually a little bit small, so if you scroll down, get to text properties, if we change that to 16 just to make it stand out a bit, and then so we need to give our app a name. So if we drag another row above the register, again it's outside the form widget, you can see we've got a new row there. We drag some text. Let's call our app AI. Call our text AI artist. Again, select the row, center the objects within the row. Now that's a bit small, that text, for our app name, so let's select the text. Let's make it 26 pixels high, and let's change the color to the primary color of the app, which is the default Flutterflow color. You can choose whichever color you want. Obviously, like I said, you can use custom colors, and I will come over when we round this up and the UI elements. I will go and we'll look at the app settings for color specifically, so you can change these values to whichever colors you want to be your theme, but we'll stick with the standard Flutterflow ones for now. And then we'll give our app an icon. So get to the build widgets, and if you scroll down, you've got the icon element. So if we drag that into the row where our text is, and down here you can see the settings for it. We'll change the size to be the same size as our text. We'll change the color to be the same size, and we need to give it an icon. So we're making an app that an artist's app, we're calling it. So if we go draw as our keyword, and I'm going to select this one, which is a crow, but there's a famous app that no longer uses its bird, so I think it'd be fitting to do that. So there's our AI artist little logo there. Now it's a bit close to the register there. We want this to be separated a bit. Now this is where, if we select our column, this is where these elements here that we haven't yet talked about. So we can separate these out. So at the moment everything's central to the column in terms of its vertical alignment. Now we can space them. This one spaces them top to bottom, but this doesn't work because we've got different columns, different elements. It doesn't really work. We could put the register within this column, which would help, and these space them out evenly, and this also space it out evenly with slightly different settings. But the way we can do this, if we go central, and what we'll do, we'll give that some padding of 100 pixels, so that now sits there nicely. That's our registration page basically set up without the functionality to actually register the user, but the user interface is all there. So now let's move on to the login page. Right, so for our login page, we don't have to rebuild all this again because most of these elements we need on the next page anyway. So what we do, this is how you add a page, but in this instance we're not going to do that. We're going to come back to that for our other pages. But to create our login page, if we go to our register page at the top of the widget tree, so this is the register page and everything in it, then at the top, as you can see, you've got the pages themselves. So if you click on register, right click it and duplicate page, we've now got an exact copy of the register page. Now what we want to do on the right hand side, go over to the page properties and change the name to login. Again, I'm using camel case, you don't have to. And we've now got a login page and a register page, both with exactly the same elements on. But we need to change a little bit of this up. So instead of register, we want our user to log in. So we click on the text, change the text itself to login, and we only need our user to put their password in once. So on the confirm password box, we can put that in the bin. So we right click on the confirm password down here and just put that in the bin. And then on the button, just want to change the text to login just to differentiate it. And there you have a basic login page. Now we need to add another element in here because it being the login page. So if we go put a row in below our form widget, and you can see we've got the row there, and if we go here we've got a row. So we simply just drag and drop the row across down here. Now keep it selected, it's too close to the bottom of the button obviously, so what we'll do, we'll give that a 50 pixel space, and what we'll also do actually, because we're going to put some text in there, we'll put a 8 pixel either side padding on the sides. So then we've got that sitting there nicely, as you can see, with little green borders. And then we want to drag a text object into there, and we simply want to put not registered. Create an account here. And then again, click on the row, center the object within the row like that. And then what will happen is we'll create an action that navigates when the user clicks on this text, navigate them to the register page, which we'll do now. So if you select the text, and then over here at the top, we've got some different options. You've got adding documentation, some animations. That one is for querying databases, but the one we want is custom actions. The default one selected is obviously the properties which we've been using, but if we click on custom actions, and then you can see there are no actions. Now you can add actions here, but it's better to do them in the action flow editor because it's just clearer to see. So if you click open on the action flow editor, and then obviously we've got basically a blank screen, and we can add actions for on tapping the screen, on double tap, or on a long press. We're sticking with on tap for this. It's just a simple navigation one. So you want to click on add action, and then you can see not defined, so it means it doesn't do anything. There is no action, and it will give you an error because the project issue is that there is the action, you've created an action but it doesn't do anything. And we simply want to navigate to, so you click on navigate to the register page. So when you click on that and it expands, you'll get a list of the pages currently in your project. Click on register, and that's all you need to do. Click close. And then what will happen is when we test this, our users click on that, it will navigate them to the register page so they can create an account. And that's our login page completed in terms of the user interface. Again, we haven't done any actions. So what we'll do now, we'll move on to just add in the home page and the settings page, and then we'll come back and look at the custom actions for these later to get everything functioning. So now we're going to create two new blank pages for our settings and our app homepage. So the home page will be where the user is diverted to when they log in, and the settings page will be where they can update the password, update their email address, etc. So this is how we add pages. So if we click on the add page element here at the top, and again, Flutterflow does provide lots and lots of different templates to use. We're deciding to build from scratch because obviously it's the best way to learn rather than just using a template already set up for us. So we want to create a blank page, which you need to give a name, which we'll call it homepage, and then we'll see that we've got there. And then again, click on there, create a blank page, which we're going to call settings. And then that's our settings page. So if we go back to the home page, so as you can see, it doesn't do anything. We've got the app bar, which we will leave on there this time. Right, so obviously we need to personalize this a bit. So rather than using the text, giving it the page title, let's change that to create an image. And this will ultimately be the home page when they log in, when they create an image. And on the settings page, we'll just change that to settings. So again, we're just selecting the text object, coming over here in the properties, to changing the text that's in the text object itself. So now we've got home page where we're going to create some images. And we've got a settings page, which we'll come back to those later. So we've got two more pages. Right, we need to add some navigation so our user can actually get from their home page to their settings page. We're going to use the app's navbar, which most apps have, obviously, if you've seen them. So if we click on this down here, it controls the navbar, and you've got it over here as well. So if we go show on navbar, currently off in app settings. So over here on the right hand side, we've only currently looked at the widget palette, which we're on now, and the widget tree. All the way down the bottom, we've got the app settings, which we are going to come back to as well with when we're adding the database extensions and etc. But for now, and this is where we add Supabase into it. This is where we publish to the web, and if we're adding in-app purchase, that kind of thing. So, but for the moment, we just want to add the app bar. We want to show the nav bar, which obviously we need to go back, and so let's go to settings, and go show navbar, and there we go. We've got our navbar. So basically what we've done there, you need to enable show navbar on the right hand side on at least 2 of your pages, and then you'll get these options, which is the different type of navbar that we're going to use. You've got Google navbar, floating navbar, but we're going to stick for now with the Flutter default navbar. If we go back to our widget tree, again, we're on the settings page, and the highlighted element on the navbar now is the page you're on. So if we go to home page, that one, so what we need is a different icon. So we go to settings, and these are navbar properties. So show on navbar, we've now got enabled, which we need because there's only 2 pages. And then if we change to settings, so if we just search for settings in the icons, just pick one of the cogs, which is the general universal setting symbol. So I'm going to pick that one, and now you can see we've got settings, home page. Now the label, which we're not showing, we'll change to settings, and that's it. So we've now got 2 pages where we can navigate between the 2 of them after our user's logged in, which is our home page and our settings page. So now we can move on to some functionality to make all of these pages interact and do something. Okay, so this is lesson 2 of module 1. Now, what we want to be doing on this lesson is setting up our Supabase project and initiating the email authentication to allow our users to log into our app in its most basic form. Lesson 2 takes us on to the next step. So now what we need to do, if you have successfully created an account on Supabase and you've logged in, you should have a blank dashboard that looks something like this. And first thing we need to do, we need to set up a new project. So what you do, so you've got your blank dashboard for Supabase, and simply click the green new project button, and your organization will already be in there. That'll be default, and you need to give your project a name. So we'll call this AI image generator, and pick a region which is going to be closest to you think is your users. So I'll pick London as it's closest to me, and you need to give out your database a name. Now that is different to your Supabase login details. So you'll have your Supabase login details that you log in to the Supabase dashboard, but this is the password to your database. It's a different thing, so you need to give it a really good password. So if you need to type something in there, and you can click generate password, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it over here somewhere so I know what it is, and then create your project. And what will happen is you now will get your API keys. So obviously by the time, I don't mind showing these, because by the time this is live and people can use it, this project will be deleted. So I don't mind showing this information, but obviously this is important that you keep this information and don't show it publicly, because it's the access to your database. It will redirect you automatically to the dashboard, and you've got your project set up. So if you go down here to the cog and project settings and you click on API, that is where you find your API keys. So when you log into Supabase, your home, this will be this will be where you'll be directed when you log in. And then to get your API keys, you simply go settings API, and then that's where you can get those from. We don't need to worry about most of these, but there's a couple we need to put into our Flutterflow app to connect it to Supabase. So we'll bring up Flutterflow now, and we'll do that. So when you log into Flutterflow this time, you are now going to have your app on your dashboard, whereas when we logged in the previous lesson, it was blank and we created the project. So you simply click on that, and there you go, your app is opened. And what we need to do, we need to connect Supabase to our Flutterflow application. So we're going to settings, and then down at the bottom here we have Supabase, so we click on that, and then enable Supabase, and then you can see we need to find the API URL and the anon key. So if we go back over to our Supabase project, we've got the API URL, so copy that, paste that into the URL, and then the anon key, which is this one. So we need to copy that. And then if you click get schema, and then once you click get schema and it's brought the project in, we haven't created any tables, so it's obviously going to be blank. And then the other thing we want to do is enable authentication. So again, while you're still in settings, on the menu on the left, we click on authentication, enable authentication, and we want Supabase as our authentication, and then we need to give it an entry page, so that's where our users start, and that will be our login page, and our logged in page will be our home page. And you can see we had a couple of errors as it's thinking and sorting itself out, which have now gone. So now we've got our Supabase project is now connected to our Flutterflow app, and it's ready for us to be able to set up user authentication. So back in Flutterflow, if you click on the widget tree option in the menu, it comes to our page. I'm on the register page, so if you can go to that first. The first thing we want to do is do something with these two text boxes because they're password boxes. What we need to do is select one of them, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the properties section, and you can see we've got a password field, so we want to enable that, and then the hide password icon, we do want to enable that, so we want the icon size to be just slightly bigger than our text maybe, so we'll go 18 and give it a color of secondary text, and you can see there we've got our hide or see password option enabled, and likewise with that one, same thing, properties on the right hand side, enable password field, 18 for our size and secondary text, and that enables that. So first thing we need to do to authenticate a user is now we're going to start creating actions. If you remember in lesson 1 we had a simple action for navigation. Okay, so we're looking to add a couple of actions onto the submit button. So if you click the submit button to select it, and again on the right hand side we want to be in the action section at the top and open the action flow editor. You can add actions in here, but it's better to use the action flow editor. It's better to get used to using it, because when you start getting more complex structures within your actions, it's just easy to visualize it in the editor. So if you open that, and then a couple of things we need to do. So we want to do on tap, and we need to add an action. And as you can see, we've got an error, because what happens is when you create an action and you've done nothing with it, it will give you an error because you've got an undefined action. So once we've finished completing the action, the error will disappear. So we're going to go in backend database, Supabase authentication, and create account. And Our auth provider is email, and our email field and password field, it's asking us for which of these boxes basically is containing the email and the password. So our email field is email, our password field is the password box, and our confirm password is confirm password box. Now we're going to switch off navigate automatically, because what that will do, once you've created the account, it automatically log you in, which we don't want to do. What we want to do is add action and navigate to login. So make our user log in one after they've created the account rather than automatically logging them in. And then the only other thing we have to do on the Supabase side to make sure this works correctly is if we head over to our Supabase. So if you go to, on your menu on the right, go to authentication and providers. So let's go home. So if you go authentication and providers, you'll get a list of authentication providers. These are all the ones that you can use for authentication within Supabase. We're using just email, and you need to ensure that confirm email and secure email change are disabled, because by default they're enabled. We need them disabled. Supabase will send you an email to confirm your email address, and we don't have any of that functionality set up, and we will do that kind of thing. Is kind of thing you do separately to Supabase, really, if you want to do that within Flutterflow. That's what they recommend. So essentially, just you only want the top option enabled, and you just click save when you've done it, and that's the user creation completed. There is some things we're going to do on the next lesson which takes that a step further, but for now that's all we need to do. And then the next thing we need to do is allow a user to log in. So if you go to your login page again on the widget tree, in the pages section at the top, click to the login. This is where we are, and once again click on the create password. In actual fact, we've got an error there, if you can see, because if you remember, we cloned the page, and what we haven't actually done is changed the text for the holding text. So we just on the properties just change that just to password. So there you go, that's better. But then once also scroll down to the bottom again, it's a password field, so enable that, and we want an icon size of 18, and secondary text is our color. Again, you can choose whichever colors you want. You have to copy mine, but if you don't know what you're doing, it's maybe best to, then you can go back afterwards and play around with those things. So that's now our password field set up, and what we need to do now is allow our users to log into our app. So click on login, and again we're going to set up some actions. So if you go into actions, open up the action flow editor, and we're going to again on tap add an action. And once again we've got an error because we've got an undefined action. So once we set the action up, the error will disappear, and we are backend database again, Supabase authentication, and we are logging our users in. Our auth provider is once again email, and our email field is email, and our password field is password. So again, those fields that we've just entered there are these two boxes. So when our users create an account, they will then come to the login page, enter the email address, enter the password, click login, and then they'll be automatically diverted to our homepage. So there's one more thing I'd like to add to the app before we do go ahead and test it, and that is on the settings page, because when we're testing the app, we may want to be able to log in and log out just to make sure everything works a few times. And what we haven't got currently is a method for logging out. So if we go to our settings page, and obviously we've got a blank page. So for now, if we just drag a row and keep the row selected, and we'll give it some padding so it's not stuck to the top there. So if we go give it 8 padding all the way around, and in our column centralize it so it's in the middle for now, and then we want to drag a text object into there and just type into there log out, and we'll probably change this at a later date, but it just allows us to, and then we'll just we'll probably put it maybe up there with an icon or something, but for now, just if we want to, just for testing purposes. So on the text, make sure it's selected, again action editor, open the flow editor, and on tap add an action, backend database, Supabase authentication, log out, and that will log us out of our application when we click on that text. Obviously, again, that's a temporary measure. We'll come back and change that at a later date. But now we can go ahead and test the app, which we do by using test mode. Certainly in this first instance, we can publish it to the web and test it that way. We can install it on our phones as a progressive web app. So that's something we're going to be doing later on in the course. But when you're building, just getting easy stuff set up, in the top right hand corner, we've got test mode. So what you do, if you click on that, what will happen is our app will start compiling, and if it doesn't compile, you'll get an error. It takes a few minutes, and when it's compiled, you get a 12-minute window on the free version to test and play around your app before you have to recompile it. While it's building, we just have to wait for it. It says it takes under 2 minutes, but in reality it probably takes a little bit longer than that by the time it's run and compiled. And there you go. It's going to continue to load. What will happen is the app will appear in the centre of our screen. As you can see, we've got a 10-minute window left after it's done the compilation of the app. Now what happens is, here we go. We have gotten to our login screen, but I'll just explain quickly what we're doing. We're in test mode. Obviously we can end the session. We can change our screen sizes depending on what we're building for. Now we're going purely mobile, so we're not going to worry about any of those in this particular course. And the instant reload. So what happens is you can leave this running in the background and you can go back into Flutterflow. You can make changes. Click instant reload and those changes will be reflected in what you do. So if you do this and you get an error or something not quite working properly, you can flip back into Flutterflow, get it fixed, and instant reload, and it should be good. So let's test our functionality and see what happens. So obviously we're not registered yet. So if we click on create an account and then we go to our register page, and then we'll put a password in and then click submit, and there we go. We've registered an account. We've been directed to the login page, which is good, which is what we want to do. If you remember back from the registration page, on the button actions, we want to create an account and navigate to login. So it works as intended. And then we now need to log in. And our password. And click login. And we're logged in directly to our home page. So again, back on here, when we click login, if you remember on the settings and the authentication, our logged in page directs us to the home page, which is what we've done. So our basic email authentication is working. That's good news. And then if we check our navigation at the bottom, our settings page and our home page. That navigation works. So anything now to check now is to log out. And there we go. So far that's good news. Our app is working as intended. So we're going to move on to module 2 now. That's module 1 complete. And in module 2 we're going to take the authentication to the next step. It starts getting a lot more complicated quite quickly. We're starting to introduce custom actions and custom code, all of which you can get from the downloads. So follow along and let's carry on building. Okay, so let's get started on module 2. Like I said at the end of module 1, gets a bit more complex. We're going to start ramping it up a little bit, but don't worry, we've got everything you need to get through this. If you've never done this before, you can just copy and paste the code and I will explain things as we go. And let's crack on. So in this module, we're going to create a public user table in Supabase. So this will be where our user data is stored that we access from our app, and which is what we use to control the flow of the app and what the user sees and what the user, how the user interacts with the database. We're going to automate the account creation. So when our user signs up to our application, we've got some Supabase trigger functions, and don't worry, that'll all be explained when we get to it, which automatically populates the public user table with the information we want upon the user signing up to our application. We're going to create the password recovery workflow. So if a user wants to change their password from in the app or they have forgotten their password, we're going to set all that up. And that again is some custom actions and some custom code. And then if the user wants to change their email address within the app, we're going to set that up. And then with the custom actions and the custom codes that we're going to use, everything you need is in the download attached to this module. So this is the document that you can download and get the code from. Essentially what we've got is every bit of code that we'll use for this particular module is in the doc. As you can see, there's only a couple of bits, but I will explain what all the code does and what it means as we get to it. And anything that you put in Flutterflow is the orange and black, and anything we put in Supabase as a SQL function is in the green. So we are in our Supabase dashboard, and so if you need to log into Supabase, and this will be the dashboard that you see, and we're going to create a new users table. Now, when our user logs into our app and signs up to our app, the schema that the user's information is stored in is called the auth schema. So the schema are the different parts of the database where information is stored. Now the auth schema is the authentication schema. Now if we go to users, there you go, we've got our authenticated user with our encrypted password and all the information for that user that we established in the previous lessons. Now we don't want to be accessing this from our application because you have to override the security policies in place for your database to be able to access the auth schema. So we don't want to be doing that, which is why we want to create a public users table where we can put the security policies in place that are respected by the queries of the app, whereas if we to query this, we have to override them to get to it, which obviously is not good practice. So if we go back to our home, so you want, from your menu on the left, you want table editor, and then the public schema will be the one that comes up. If you go in directly from the auth schema where we just were, just select public schema from the drop down box in the top, and you can see we've got no tables. So we want to create a public users table. So if we click on the green button, which is create new table, and we give the table a name, and we're going to call it users. We don't need to worry about that. Now keep the row level security enabled. We will sort that out in a second. In the first instance, we're going to put in just a one basic policy just to allow us to get into the table and read and write to it. But in our next lesson we are going to come back and sort the security out, but in the first instance we will just make it very simple. So keep that enabled, and then down here we need to add some columns. So we've got the ID, and that is the ID of the record in the table, so that will be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the timestamp the record was created at is the default ones, so we need to add some more. So we want to add the user ID, and that will be something called a UUID, the Universally Unique Identifier, and that will be how we identify our user from within our app. So whenever we are querying information from the database, we'll do it using the UUID, which is a random identifier. So we're not sending email addresses, etc. to and from the database. It is the UUID. Then we want their email address stored in there. We may want to send them emails or whatever, so we'll have that, and that will be a type text. So now we've got this set up, what we need to do, we need to link the user ID to the user ID in the table, so our database knows that the user is the same one. So we've got a user in our auth scheme and a user in our public.users table, which are the same user. So we need to link the UUID. So this value, the UUID, needs linking between the two, so we know we're dealing with the same user. So if we add foreign keys, and then we want to select the auth schema, and we want to reference the users table, and that's the auth.users table, which we just looked at a second ago. And then we want the UUID, the user ID in our public.users table, to match our ID, which is the UUID of our user in the auth table. So that will make sure that our user is recognized as the same one in both tables. And then for now we won't worry too much about any of this information. This is to do with cascading on, deletion, etc. So none of the information we need to worry about for now. This is more advanced stuff which we're not going to get into at this stage. But if you've matched your user ID in your users table to your ID in your auth table, you're good to go. Click save, and then we'll make our user ID the primary key and click save. And there we go. We've got the link between the two tables, and we've got user ID as the primary key. So that is now ready to receive data. So the final thing we've got to do on the users table at this stage is add a row level security policy. So within Postgres and within Supabase, there's something called row level security, and this is how we control who accesses what in the database. So certain users can only perform certain actions and access certain information. They can access their own information or whatever, for instance. So it can be quite complicated, but in this instance, we're going to do it very, very simply. So, and all this allow basically anybody to read and write to our table, which is obviously very bad practice, but for setting up the app and while we're testing and just building up some basic functionality, we'll do that just to demonstrate the RLS policy. And then when we move on to the next section, we'll add some proper policies in there. But for now, we're just going to add one. So if we add RLS policy, and you can see it's empty, so new policy. And if you go full customization, and then you need to give your policy a name, so call it temp policy. And the reason we call it temp policy, so we remember to change it. And then you will need to click on the all option, so this will allow this policy to be in place for select, insert, update and delete actions on this table. And you simply want to write in there true. So that is allowing anybody with the URL of our table to be able to select, insert, update or delete information. Of course, at this stage it doesn't matter because we are not published anywhere, it's not an app, it's not published to the web, we're just doing it in test mode. So before we do any proper updating and publication of this, we will change these to proper security policies, but this will allow us a quick way to allow us to access our database without too many security issues. So just click review and save policy, and there you go. You see temp policy is applied to the table, and now we can carry on building. So the next thing we need to do is create our first SQL function. Now, if you go on your menu on the left hand side and click on the database option, and then you have got this number of options, but we want, for instance, functions for now, although we're not going to create it in here. But this is where any functions that we create within our database in Postgres SQL are stored here. Now, you can create them in here, but I find this is not the easiest way of doing it. We're going to create them in the SQL editor and then create the functions that way. And that's what the code that you've got in your document that you've downloaded, that's how they're set up to do. So, but this is where they're stored, and we'll come back to this in a second. So if, again, on the menu on the left, you want the SQL editor, so start there. And as you can see, we've got a blank. There is no queries and no code. This is the code editor. This is where you return the results of your query when you run it, and this is where your functions that you've created, all your SQL queries, are all stored down here. So we need this function here. So on the second page of your document, we want to copy and paste this code. So if we copy that out of there, head back to Supabase, paste it in there, and that's what it looks like. So basically what we're doing, we are going to create a function in our database functions called update public users, and this updates public users table when a user signs up, and it returns a trigger. So essentially what happens is triggering this function from somewhere else, which I'll come to in a second, which is the second snippet of code you've got to paste in a second. Security definer, because we're going into the auth scheme, we have to use the security definer role within Supabase to access the auth scheme, because there's two types of functions. There's security invoker and the security definer. Now, a security invoker function is the one that operates with permissions of someone that is running the function. So therefore the function will only allow to perform the task that user is authenticated to do, i.e. the authenticated user, whatever access they have, whatever their permissions, that's all that function can do. A security definer function operates as the person who created the function, so it will override any RLS policies, which again we're going to come on to, and it operates as the person that created the function. So we use these with care, but to access the auth scheme, the auth schema, that is why we use security definer, because you need to be a security defined function to access it. So which is why we're building the users table in the first place. So basically what we're saying here is we're going to update the corresponding records of the public users table when there is an insert into the auth schema. So insert the user ID and the email address into our public users table when a user signs up. That's basically what this function is performing. So what you want to do once you've copied and pasted it is click run, and you'll get a message there that says success, no rows returned. You can see it's stored here, and then if we go to database functions, we've got an update public users function stored there, and you can see it's security definer. So this will either be invoker or definer. The vast majority of ones we do will be as an invoker, but this one needs to be a definer because we are accessing the auth schema, which you can't do as a security invoker. And the next thing we need to do, we need a new query. So click on the new query and you'll get entitled query come up. And we've got another blank SQL query window. So if we go back to our document and you want the function at the bottom, and we need to copy that into our SQL editor. So basically what we're doing here, create trigger after auth uses insert. So essentially after an insert, i.e. a new record on auth.users, we execute the update public users function, which is the one we just created. So this creates a trigger called after auth users insert, and the trigger performs when an insert on the auth table is undertaken. So when a user signs up on the auth.users table, we'll execute the function that writes their information from the auth schema, which is this function we've just created, writes their information from the auth schema into the public schema. So again, once you're happy with that, click run, success, no rows returned. And if we go database and we go to triggers, and then if you go to the auth schema at the top, and we've got a new trigger in the auth schema, that after insert, we trigger the update public users function. So what's going to happen is our user will sign up, we trigger the update public users function, which will write their email address and their user ID into the public users table. And that's that setup. So we can actually test this out in Supabase, but what we'll do first, so if you go into authentication and we've got our user that we created in our previous lesson, what we're going to do, we're going to delete them. So it's on the menu on the left hand side, authentication, and then you get straight up with your list of users, and we're just going to delete that user. You don't have to, you can just add a new user if you wish, but I tend to just try and keep the same user. But you can just keep adding users if you want to, but I've deleted that. I've now got no users in the project. So what will happen is when we run our application in Supabase again, we'll get a new user in the authentication here, and because of our new functions, we'll get a new user in here as well with their user ID and their email address. So let's now head back over to Flutterflow, go into test mode and see if this works. So we're back in Flutterflow on the dashboard. If you're not already logged in, log into your Flutterflow, you have the app obviously, and if you just click on the app, now we haven't changed anything in Flutterflow, we haven't needed to change anything in Flutterflow at this stage. This is all been back-end Supabase work. So if we go straight to run your app in test mode, and we'll wait for the app to compile. Okay, so we're in test mode, and what we need to do is create a new account. Now I'm going to reuse the same account because you saw me delete the previous one. If you obviously haven't done that, and you will need to use a different email address for this to work. So and then you want a password. And then click submit. And there we go. We've diverted to login page, which means we should have a new user registered. So if we head over back to Supabase, so in the public schema, we've got a new user created with the email address and the user ID, which is what we were writing in with our function, with our function here that we've triggered. So we've created the new user ID and email address into our public users table. So that has worked. And if we go into authentication, obviously we'll have our user in there. So that's worked as intended. So that's good news. So the one thing I'll say finally before we move on to the next session, which is recovering user passwords and emails, is when you are creating this function, you need to make sure that the column names that you're putting in here, so if you're copy and pasting this from the document, you need to make sure that the column names that are in the function are the same, identical to the ones you are creating here, otherwise you'll get an error and it won't work. So with all that said, this is functioning as intended, so let's move on. Okay, so we are going to be looking at resetting our password and resetting our email address, which are the last things we need to do on the authentication side of our AI Artist app. So what we need to do is do a few things in here. We've got our login page and our create account. Now what we need to do is create a forgot password link. So if we drag a new row into our column below the create an account text, and we want to add a text object in there, and if we select the row and we align that center, and then on the rows where I want to give it some padding, so if we put a 20 pixel pad in there, and then the text, we just simply want to change to forgot password. Now that is going to have a link on it, which we'll do in a second. So then if we go also into our settings page, and we've got our logout there, so we're going to tidy this up now and make it look a bit better. So on the column there, if we change the alignment to the top, and on our row change the alignment to the left, and then we want to add an icon next to our logout text, and if we give the icon a little bit of padding, 50 pixels or so, and then we want to change the icon itself, and if you just search for logout, you can pick any of these options. Go for the sharp one. And we have currently got our logout action on the text. So what we're going to do, we're going to remove that. So we delete the action off the text, and then on the row, so we can tap anywhere on the row basically, is what we're saying. We want to add an action there. So add an action, and it's backend database, Supabase authentication, and logout. So we're just changing the action from just tapping the text action to tapping anywhere on the row. And I think we will add a bit more padding to the top of our row. So if we go 10 to the left, 10 to the right, 25, and then 10 to the bottom. That's our logout tidied up a little. Now we want to add another row in there, and in this one we will have the padding as 10 all the way around, and we need a text object, and we need another icon, and we'll give the icon again sort of like 50 padding, and that text wants to be reset email. I don't like that. Let's remove the padding from there and from there, and then what will look better probably is if we align the icons by just a bit of UI. Let's go full there, and then on either side on the text object, let's give it 20 to the left. And on the icon, let's go 20 to the right. And on this one, we'll go. So that space in there, that makes our icons as far apart as they can go within there, within the parent element, which is what we're seeing there. And then all we're doing then is putting the pad on either side, and it just keeps our icons and our text aligned basically. And then that's going to have a link when you tap on that, which we're going to set up shortly. And then on the row, have a new row, and that also wants 10 padding all the way around. And then we want some text and another icon. We need to change the icon there as well. And then if we spread those apart, and we want 20 again, and 20, and then so for our, I want to change the email icon. So let's go, just pick one basically. And this one will be, the text on that will be reset password. In case you also want to do that from in the app. And then we can use one of these ones with the stars. Okay, so that's our UI for it. We don't need to do any more than that in here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to change the look at very slightly of the app bars. I'm not keen on the default Flutterflow color. So for our scaffold, we're using the primary background. So we'll make it look a little bit more modern. So we use the primary background for our bar color, and we'll remove the elevation, so you just change that to 0 and it makes it flat. Then our text there, which is our settings headline text, change the color to primary text. Just makes it look a little bit more modern. And we'll also do that on our home page. Now obviously we haven't done anything with this yet, but we are going to do that in the next module. That's when the good stuff starts. So we want our text to be primary text, and our background color to be primary background, and elevation to be 0. We're now ready to set up the logic for resetting our email and password. So let's move on to do that now. Okay, so now we've got our settings page set up for our resetting our password. We can do some work on that. So we need to add a new page. We'll create a blank page, and we'll call this reset password. Use camel case to keep everything as we have been doing. And we don't need the app bar at all for this. And in here, we need to add a text field. So if we scroll down to the form elements, drag a text field in, and set a column and just centralize that vertically. And then let's give that some better padding. And then change some properties on that. So our label needs to be email. And then scroll down to the bottom, we've got the decoration properties. We want an outline border, and the border color we'll leave as alternate, so it's just like a very slightly different grey. And then if we go back to the top, we want to add a row, and that wants to be, give it 20 padding at the top, and then maybe keep everything the same, 20 at the sides as well. And in there we want to add a button. If we centralize the button to the row like that, and change the button text to reset. Okay, and then what we'll do, just to emphasize what we're doing, and then let's add a row with some padding, and then some text that simply says password reset. Okay, so this page does not require our user to be authenticated. So if we click on the button to select that, and on our actions, let's open up the action editor. We add an action, and we go backend database, Supabase authentication, reset password, and then email field is our text field we've just created. So what that does, that sends the value we have added in this box to Supabase, and that does not reset the password. That triggers the email that your user gets to reset the password, and that's some work we need to do on the Supabase side, but that's what we need to do there. So on our login page, we can now set, if we select the row, we can now set an action to navigate to reset password from the forgot password text. And also on our settings page, select the row, add an action, navigate to reset password. Okay. And then on our root settings, need to make sure that our pages where we want our user to be logged in are ticked to requires authentication. So we need our user to be logged in to be able to see this page, which we don't with the reset password page. And then something, because by default they're not necessarily all selected as requires authentication, so we need to check this as we go along. You can actually set new pages up to be automatically authenticated, which some people may prefer, but I just go through and check them as I go and tickle and tick the box as I'm going through it. So obviously our login page and our register page are not, our reset password isn't, but our settings page and our home page are. Okay, so what we need to do now, we need to essentially use this page again for our email reset. So if you right click on the page name in the pages bar and duplicate it, we'll have the same thing again. It's called password reset copy, and we do want that to be authenticated and want to change that to reset email, and then we'll change that text to email reset. And then our action here, so if we go back into the action editor, we need to change that Supabase authentication, update email, same text field, and that will update the email. You don't have to do anything else beyond that. So then if we go back to our settings page, and on that row add an action which is navigate to reset email. Okay, so what we've done there, we've added a reset email page where our user taps on that and navigated to this page, and they can reset their email address. and we've created a reset password page, and when they tap on that, they are navigated to this page to reset the password. And also on the login, if they tap on that, they're also navigated to the reset password page. They type in their email, tap reset, and then they get navigated elsewhere to create the new password. So now we're going to set up the actions we need to generate the page that actually resets the password, which we're going to do in a separate Flutterflow app, and then we'll go into Supabase to make everything work. So if you go back to your Flutterflow dashboard, I'm going to create a new project. So I just need to, I think, briefly explain why I've decided to do this in a new project. So if this is a web app, you would put this functionality within your web app obviously. Because this has been set up as a native mobile app, we use deep linking for the routing within the app. So if we click on the reset email link on the email client in our phone, then it will divert us back to the app. However, if your user happens to click on the link on their desktop app, then they'll just end up in a blank page because it's not a sort of a web address that you're using. It's the deep linking on the phone. So therefore, that's why I'm doing it this way. There are other ways around it, obviously, but this is just, I believe, in my opinion, the simplest way of doing it. So that's why I'm setting up a separate project for this, and I'd be doing the same if it was for confirmation of email as well, for the same reason. So your user can click on whatever email client they're using, they can click on the link and it will take them to the page they need, and it won't be platform dependent. That's my theory behind it. That's what I'm doing like this. Like I say, there are other ways, but the functionality, if you do use other ways, like you are building a web app or you want to use the deep linking for mobile phones, then the functionality is all the same. It's just this is the way I've chosen to do it. So with that being said, let's move on. And we'll create a blank project. We need to give it a name. We'll call it Auth Reset. And we'll create a blank project. And we can just skip this. Okay, so we've got a default page called home page. So we'll change that to reset password. And we don't need the app bar for this again. It's not really necessary. So again, we'll add in the text field and we'll center it again. Basically what we've just done on the previous section. And we'll just give it some padding. And we'll do exactly what we did before. We'll just scroll down. And then your label wants to be your password. And change the border to outline and keep the border alternate. And we then want a row above and a row below. So just to keep everything standard across what we're doing. So then we want some text in there, which we'll center and change the text value just to new password. And in there, again, we want a button. Center that. Change the text to reset. Okay, now the reason we're doing it like this is we are working on the assumption that our app that we're building, our AI Artist app, is a native app. It's going to be on the App Store, it's going to be on Google Play. And then when you tap on reset password in the app, you are navigated away to a web page, because that's the best way of doing it through Supabase. So this is going to be published to the web, this page, and that's how we're going to reset our password so we can whitelist the URL we create within Supabase, which we're going to go through, so don't worry. But that's the reason why we set up a separate app for it, in case you're wondering. So we now need to create a custom action. So if we head to the code document, so in the module 2 custom code document, we've got the update user password code. So we need to basically copy that, and then we want custom code on the left hand side there, and we want to add an action. We want to paste between this section here, so below the do not remove or modify the code above, that's where we put in our new action in there. So we've got a few errors that we need to resolve. That's not a problem. So we need to change the name of our action. We're going to change it to match there, and it's called change password error. And we need to return a value, and you can see returning a Boolean value. So we just select Boolean from the drop down, and then we need to pass in a new password value. So you go to add arguments, and it'll be new password, and the value is a string, you can see there. And then for error handling, we need to create an app state variable. So there we've got app values, and want an app state variable, and we want to call it custom error. And just create that. We're going to call this function from when we click on the change password button, and what we're going to do, we're going to update user attributes in Supabase with a new password, and if there's an error, we're going to be writing it to the app state variable custom error, which we can then use in a dialog box if there is an error. So if we head back to our reset password page, and in here we need to add an action. So let's go open up to the action editor, custom actions, change password, and new password will be the widget state of the text field we are creating, and our action output variable will be reset. So what will happen is when we click on that, and hopefully it will reset the password. So we can add some extra in here for error handling. So if we add a conditional, and the condition will be the first value, which is the action output. So if our action output, which is called reset, returns true, what we will do, we will have an alert, an information alert that simply says password reset. You can now close this page and log into your app. And then if it's false, we'll do the same. We'll have an alert, be an information dialog, and we'll go error. And the message we're going to give the user will be the value we've written to the app state variable. And all we need to do then, we don't need to terminate on both, but to keep it tidy. So what we've done here, changing the password, if it resets, so if our value is returned true from the custom action, we just say, great, you can close this page and log in. If it returns an error, we say there's been an error and we display what the error is. And then in the code, what we're doing there, this is where we are writing the error to the app state. Okay, so I was concerned there about the all the errors in that there, all the red underlined things, and you saw the red blocks there. So we've fixed that. So what I have done in the settings, and you'll need to do this the same thing, we need to enable Supabase. So you toggle that, and your API URL and your anon key, and it's exactly the same we have done for the main app. You need to add those in there, and they are where you find those in your project settings API, and you've got your URI and your anon key. And then if you get schema, that'll enable Supabase, and that will clear our errors, and that'll allow us to use this code by calling the code that we're using to change the password within Supabase. So once you've done that and you've got no errors, our next step is to publish this to the web, because we need to whitelist the URL within Supabase. So if you go web publishing and then click on open platform settings, and you need to enable web, and if you go back to web publishing, and you'll get an option to publish. Now I would give it a name you're going to remember. And then click on publish. Now, because we're using the free version of Flutterflow, we'll get the watermark in the bottom there. So reserving the subdomain, and it'll publish the app. Okay, so when it's finished publishing, this is the screen you're going to see, and if you click on that there, Flutterflow takes a minute to load, and obviously we don't really want it to look like that, but because we've set it up on a mobile app template, so if you open that on mobile, it will be confined to the screen. We can change that in case you are using it on a desktop. So if we drag a container into there, and we make the width 375 pixels, so that's just below our screen size. And then if we make the height 500 pixels, we want to grab a column and drop it in there. We don't need to do this particularly, and drag our 3 items within there, and then center them vertically. And if you get any alignment issues, select your column and just center it. Now you don't need to do this, however it will look better on a big screen. So if you republish, because obviously that looks ridiculous on a small screen, you wouldn't get this obviously, but on the big screen, because we've got it set to full width, it doesn't look great. So we're just going to republish and see what it looks like. So while that is republishing, we need to copy our URL to our app. And if we go into Supabase, so if you go into the authentication section and you want URL configuration, So our site URL will be default set to localhost. We need to change it to our site URL. And as this is the home page, the only page of our app, we could also add the same one in there, and this is where, so what we've done there is we're saying that it's okay for URLs within this domain to be diverted to, and what we're doing, we're whitelisting this particular domain, although it's the same one ultimately, so therefore that could be /reset password if we have more than one page on there, and this will allow us to redirect our users to reset the password on that page. So that sounds like it's done. So if we close that and then we click on that and then refresh, for some reason it always makes you refresh, something to do with the caching of Chrome, I suspect. And there we go. So that's what we've done there, and that will look exactly the same on a phone screen, so that's ideal. So we don't need that anymore. Okay, so we need to go back into Supabase and we go email templates, and we want the reset password, and we don't need to do anything because we are going to the only page on the website, so this should just work fine. So what will happen is when you click on your reset password link in your app, you'll get an email to this confirmation URL, of which when you tap on that, it will take you to the page we've just created. We type in your new password, click reset, you'll get one of these two dialog boxes depending on if the password is reset successfully, and then you can then go on and log back into the Artist AI app. So that's the functionality all set up. All that's left now to do is test it in test mode of our Artist AI app. Okay, so before we go ahead and test this, there's a couple of more things you just need to do. So on our reset password page, we want to add another action, and that is a navigate to our login page so we don't get stuck on the password page. So that'll be that. And then on our Auth Reset app, on our text field, we need to make sure that is set as a password field. So then that way, set our icon color to primary text, the icon size to 24. There we go. So basically, so it hashes out the password basically. So that's all we needed to do on that. So if we republish that, so when that's republished, we'll go into test mode and test it in the Artist AI app. Okay, so we're republished. We can head back over to our image generator app and go into test mode. Okay, so we've got a login page. We want to click on forgot password because we're going to obviously test out the functionality. Ask for our email. So whatever email you've used when you created the account in the previous section. And then click on the reset. Okay, so password reset email has been sent and it's takes to the login page. That's good. So if you go to your email, and when you click on the link in your reset password email, you'll be brought to the new password screen. You can see we've got the icon there for password. So type in your new password and click reset. don't want to save it, obviously. So there you go. So it looks like we've had a successful password change. So we're finished with this page. So we can go back into our test mode and try and log in. And there we go, we're logged in. So that's all functions, that's everything working as it should to this point. And that does in fact bring us to the end of this little mini course. We've done a full step-by-step on how to set up Supabase authentication with setting up the project, setting up the Supabase instance, and really starting from the very beginning, starting from scratch. So hopefully that's useful. On the reset password, there are a couple of other ways you can do it. You could use, obviously we've set up a different app for that, but you could do it within, if there's a web app, do it within the same app. Obviously you wouldn't have a new app for it. So there's a few other ways around that, but this is one way of doing it. You can explore others. And that's it. As always, hopefully that was useful. It's been quite a long one. So thanks for sticking around, and please consider a like, subscribe, and I'll speak to you next time.